71 years before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a local bus, the young Ida B. Wells was fighting for what she knew was right.
In 1884, the 22-year-old Wells was working in rural schools, so she was a commuter. She had bought a ticket in the ladies' car and had ridden in it before, but for some reason, on that day, the conductor got fed up with her and tried to physically force her out of the car. She was not going to give up that easily, so she fought back.
I refused, saying that the forward car was a smoker, and as I was in the ladies' car, I proposed to stay. The conductor tried to drag me out of the seat, but the moment he caught hold of my arm, I fastened my teeth in the back of his hand. I had braced my feet against the seat in front and was holding to the back, and as he had already been badly bitten, he didn't try it again by himself. He went forward and got the baggage man and another man to help him, and of course they succeeded in dragging me out.
Shortly thereafter, she sued the railroad. Her case wove through the courts. Eventually, she won in the lower courts. They said that she was, in fact, a lady. But when the case got to the Tennessee Supreme Court, she lost. At the time, Tennessee was in the process of implementing extreme segregation laws, so there was no way she could have won her case. She was devastated, but the verdict fueled her activism for the rest of her life.
She is born in the Deep South. In the deep South, is orphaned at an early age just after slavery, and finds herself and her family dissolved. She is not pleased about this. She takes up a position as a school teacher. She ends up moving some of her siblings to Memphis, Tennessee, and then soon thereafter takes up a career as a journalist, still in the Deep South.
Ida moved into her aunt's house in Memphis in 1883 with those siblings she had managed to keep together. She worked as a teacher, traveling to a nearby suburb for higher wages. During school vacations, she went to college. Shortly after the train incident, she stopped teaching and went into full-time investigative journalism.
Wells's friend Thomas Moss ran a store called the People's Grocery on the outskirts of Memphis. His grocery store was doing well. One day, a white mob invaded the store and a fight broke out. 3 white men were wounded, and Moss and the other 2 men were jailed with pending trial. Later, a large white lynch mob stormed the jail, brought them out into the street, and killed them. When Ida heard about this incident, she immediately wrote editorials in both of her papers.
When the Civil War was finally over, to try to eliminate the inequality of the last 200 years, the federal government sent troops into the South to make sure whites were treating black people equally. This period of Reconstruction ended abruptly in 1877. Because slavery had been outlawed, white people proceeded to make it as difficult as possible for black people to live a normal life. They passed discriminatory laws called Black Codes.
The Black Codes, which eventually became the Jim Crow laws, were a compilation of state and local legislation that promoted racism and segregation and governed the lives of many a Southerner. These laws permitted the lynching of black citizens and thus played an enormous role in protecting members of the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist organizations from legal pushback. While federal government did not promote them, they most certainly did not condemn them.
Wells started her full-time career as a journalist in 1889. She ran 2 newspapers, first the Memphis Free Speech and Headlight, and later Free Speech. She had very strong political views and expressed them in her writing. These views mainly concerned the rights of black people, especially black women. An excerpt from one of her papers.
The masses of the women of our race have not awakened to a true sense of the responsibilities that devolve on them, of the influence they exert, they have not yet realized the necessity for erecting a standard of earnest, thoughtful, pure, noble womanhood, rather than one of fashion, idleness, and uselessness.
So the printing press is a centrally important part of this story, right? So she is a writer and an investigative journalist. Those things alone are not occupations that feature women at all in the 19th century. She is also printing her own newspaper or broadsheet, doing the work herself. This too is a radical and original act. There aren't very many black newspapers or black run newspapers at the day and time, certainly none that took up the kind of progressive political stance that she's taken up. So the press that she owns and runs becomes a kind of symbol of her independence and her spirit as a political radical.
Wells printed her papers in a printing shop in Memphis. One day, when Wells was away investigating a story in New York, a mob raided her printing shop and set her printing presses on fire. She got the message of what had happened to her shop when she was still up north and opted to never come back.
When it gets destroyed, it's not just about stopping her from saying these things, it's also about stopping her from finding her voice. It's about diminishing the symbolic power of her as an outspoken advocate of equality and feminism, and it's a real blow, and a reminder that the press can always be a fairly radical thing in and of itself.
Wells moved north to Chicago, where she lived for the rest of her life. From Chicago, she traveled to places in and around the northeastern United States and London to raise awareness about lynching and other injustices that black people and women faced everywhere, especially in the South.
Wells worked particularly hard to combat lynching. Throughout her career, a collection of postcards was produced featuring black men being lynched. These disturbing postcards were circulated through the mail and can be found in the photo collection Without Sanctuary.
Besides writing in her newspaper, Wells wrote quite a few books, and most on the subject of lynching. Her published works include Southern Horrors and Other Writings, Crusade for Justice, The Red Record, and On Lynchings.
Although lynching continued until 1968, 30 years after her death, Wells had a direct impact on its demise through her writing and outreach.
Ida B. Wells, a name not all have heard, but one that those who have look up to. She exceeded all expectations, especially being a woman of her time. She continued her education and produced many works which are still valued today.
It is crucial that Wells be brought back into mainstream consciousness as the courageous civil rights leader that she was.